Hello and welcome to Wrapped in Books. My name is Pega, I'm an author, and today I'm going to be reviewing Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. I had never read a Colleen Hoover book before this. I had heard about her because she's a very famous writer, but I had never subjected myself to any of her writing. And now that I have some thoughts. A few of them good, most of them not so good. This book really didn't work for me for multiple reasons that I am going to discuss in this review today. I actually think the book had an interesting premise and a potential to be a good, even a great story in the hands of a better writer. But honestly, I don't think Colleen Hoover is that good of a writer. I will explain in this review how I think this book could have been better. Obviously, those are my thoughts, my opinions, and I'm sure that not everyone agrees with me. This review is going to be a deep dive into this book, so spoilers ahead. If book content and book reviews is something that you're interested in, please consider subscribing to my channel so that you wouldn't miss the future videos. Now, without further ado, let's wrap ourselves in this book that is called Reminders of Him. Our main character in this book is a young woman named Kenna. One night, Kenna and her boyfriend Scotty get drunk and high and then have an accident on the road, which results in Scotty's death. Kenna survives, but spends the past 5 years of her life in jail. She gives birth to their daughter, DM, in jail, loses custody of her to Patrick and Grace, Scotty's parents. So when she's finally released from jail, she decides to pursue her daughter. She goes back to Scotty's hometown. There, she meets a young man named Ledger. Ledger and Kenna immediately become attracted to one another, but having a relationship is difficult for them because Kenna is still pursuing her daughter. Ledger also is facing a dilemma of his own. Does he help Kenna reach her daughter, or does he send her out of their lives forever? As I said, the premise of this book is actually interesting. I like the stories of second chances and redemption arcs. They are one of my favorite tropes. Colleen Hoover writes like she doesn't read. I hope that makes sense. She writes like a person who watches a lot of shows and films, but not a person who actually reads a lot of books. Her writing very much comes across as a rough manuscript for a cheap Hallmark movie. That's the best way I can describe it. There is no depth to anything in this book. There is no depth to the characters. There is no depth to the story. Characters are flat and one-dimensional. Some of them, like Amy, Lady Diana, a few more that I will get into, are barely even characters. They're plot devices. Kenna and Ledger, our two main characters, on top of being one-dimensional, are kind of problematic characters, which I will also get into later. The plot is as shallow as it can be. It's such a shame because I think the premise of this book actually had a lot of potential. There is a base for a good story here somewhere. But Colleen Hoover circles around all of that potential and then throws it in the dumpster in the end. This book also contains some of my least favorite tropes in writing. I will explain. It's safe to say that it didn't click with me at all, especially because there was potential and it was wasted. This book is dual POV. One chapter is narrated from Kenna's perspective and the other chapter is narrated from Ledger's perspective. We start the story with Kenna. So Kenna is out of jail, back to Scotty's hometown to find her daughter. She's broke. She doesn't know anybody in town. She doesn't have a car because of what happened with Scotty. What she's hoping for is to get a job, clean up her act, and then ask Scotty's parents to let her meet her daughter, DM. I don't know if some of these names are American names. I have never heard the name Kenna. When I was reading the book, I kept wanting to read Jenna. I might refer to her character as Jenna at some points throughout this review. Also the name DM. The name of her daughter. I don't know if that's an American name. I wasn't even sure how to read it. Ledger also is a name that I haven't heard, but I've heard that Colleen Hoover uses unusual names in her books. So Kenna arrives at this apartment building named Paradise Apartments. She has rented a flat there, which is not anything special, but that's all she can afford at the moment. She meets with the landlady who is named Ruth. Apparently her cat has just given birth to some kittens, which is why when Ruth first sees Kenna, she asks her to take one of their kittens home with her. Kenna at first doesn't want to agree. She doesn't want a kitten in her life right now. Because Ruth promises that she would take electricity from her bill for 2 weeks, she agrees. I was expecting this kitten to come into play in this book. This is such a good setup when you think about it. The young woman is out of jail. She's broke. She doesn't have any company. She needs to find a job which is going to be difficult because of her past. And she suddenly gets a kitten. I thought I was going to read a story about this woman taking care of this kitten, which eventually ends in a redemption arc for her. I thought I'm going to see her interact with this kitten, feed it, take care of it. Maybe she faces some challenges while raising this kitten, because we all know that taking care of a kitten or a puppy is very difficult. They come with many challenges. So maybe she's going to, doubt herself at some points and think whether or not she's actually ready to take the role of a mother. She's going to wonder, whether or not taking care of a child is going to be more difficult than taking care of a kitten. So she has to come through, she has to stay strong, but none of that happens. Kenna barely even interacts with this kitten throughout the book. She, I think, feeds it a couple of times and pets it a couple of times, and that's it. And I was like, why did you introduce the kitten into the story and then decided not to do anything with it? I can't believe Colleen Hoover did this and then missed the opportunity completely to use this kitten in a meaningful way. I recently read a book named Will Prescribe You a Cat. I couldn't help but compare these two stories together. I'm not saying that they should be the same, but there are some similarities in there. And that book does a much better job with the idea of owning a cat to battle depression. The same premise is present here, but it is not used in any way. Kenna doesn't have enough time to interact with her kitten because she's too busy going to a local bar to fall in love with the first guy she sees. I am not exaggerating. This book is insta-love as it can be. She goes to this bar, she meets this hot guy, and all I know about him is that he's hot, that's it. And the hot guy thinks she's also very hot. And bam, that's it. They're in love. What more do you want? Well, this hot guy is named Ledger. He's the owner of the bar, previously a bookstore that Kenna and Scotty used to visit frequently before Scotty's death. Ledger used to be Scotty's best friend, but Kenna doesn't know it yet because they have never met. I would think that when you have a girlfriend and a best friend, you would at least show their pictures to each other. I mean, I know phones existed in this world, but Scotty didn't do that for some reason. So neither Kenna or Ledger knows at this point who the other person is. This insta-love trope is one of my least favorite things in writing. I like a romance that has build-up to it. And this one has no build-up to it whatsoever. Ledger, upon seeing Kenna, thinks to himself that she has a face that belongs on a painting and it should be on the wall of a museum. Okay. At the bar, Kenna orders coffee and then has an emotional meltdown. He senses something is off about this girl, but not enough to not invite her to come back to the bar after hours. Kenna decides to accept his invitation because she's the queen of poor decision making. You come back to a small town where your former boyfriend lived, the boyfriend that died in the car accident that you were also involved in. And you're here because you're trying to convince his parents to let you see your daughter. And your first move is to go to a bar and hook up with the owner. I don't know. That has to be a bad decision. Anyway, she goes back. She's waiting for Ledger to finish his shift while Ledger is officiating orders by pointing. And Jenna finds this attractive. I stand up, thinking maybe I need to trickle out. But when he sees me stand, he points. He makes a simple motion with his finger indicating for me to sit back down. So I do. I had no idea pointing was sexy. I mean, yes, she has been in jail for the past 5 years, but you have to be on a whole other level to find pointing sexy. And then Jenna sits on Ledger's lap. Just like that. They sit next to each other and she slides onto his lap and they start making out. Somewhere in the middle of them kissing, Kenna realizes that this is actually Scotty's former best friend. But then she continues kissing him anyway. Like, what? When I read it in the book, I physically recoiled because it was so jarring. Now, what are the odds of Kenna moving back to town to immediately hook up with Scotty's best friend? You might ask. And this is one of the many convoluted things that comes up in this book. She decides to kiss him once again before she stops. And then she cries again. Ledger decides that he's still very attracted to this woman because, as we all know, there's nothing more attractive than a woman kissing you and then bursting into tears. He decides to give her a ride back home in his orange truck, which we realize is actually the truck that Scotty borrowed the first time he took Kenna on a date. So what happens on the drive back home? They start to make out in the truck again. I mean, this has to be poor decision making. This is not romantic in any way. They almost have sex in the truck, the same truck that Scotty used to drive before he tragically died in an accident that also involved Kenna. Thankfully, someone shows up and cuts them short, so they both go back home. We then switch to Ledger's POV. We realize that for the past 5 years since Scotty's been dead, he has been involved in Diem's life. He visits Diem regularly at Patrick and Grace's house. He's her baseball coach. Patrick and Grace actually love Ledger. They have a really good relationship with each other. Patrick and Grace still hold Kenna responsible for what happened that night. They already fear that she is going to come back looking for Diem now that she is out of jail. That's just as far as their characterization goes. They are concerned grandparents. That's it. Don't expect anything more because there is no depth to their characters whatsoever. They just hope that Kenna will stay away from their granddaughter. Kenna, on the other hand, has no intention of staying away. She goes to town looking for a job. She wants to have a job before she meets Patrick and Grace, which is the only good choice I think she made throughout this book. However, finding a job is difficult for her because her spending the past 5 years in jail. Now, this is a topic, a conversation that I'm actually interested in. People go to prison for a lot of reasons. I think some of the people who have served time in jail definitely need a second chance. It's very important that we have the conversation of how we should accept these people back into society. Should they prove themselves to be worthy? As I said, I really like a redemption arc story, and I would have liked it here if Colleen Hoover had dedicated more time and effort to it. But she doesn't. Kenna goes to several places. She doesn't find a job. She gets frustrated. She goes into the bathroom of a local grocery store to cry. And then immediately she meets with the supply manager of the grocery market who decides to give her a job. Just like that. There is nothing to it. I mean, she doesn't do anything to prove herself to be worthy of this job. Nothing. They just have a conversation. The supply manager, Amy, who is another plot device in this book, asks her why she's crying. She says, oh, because she just came out of prison, so she can't find a job. And she's like, okay, I'll give you a job. That's it. I don't know what to say. So Kenna is now in charge of bagging groceries at the store. It is obviously not a job that is going to pay much, but she hopes it is a start to, to pay her bills and also prove to Patrick and Grace that she's a responsible person. Now, this is another problem that I had with this part of the book. Kenna, upon getting the job, immediately decides to show up at Patrick and Grace's door to ask for her daughter. I mean, give it time. I understand that she's desperate. She wants to meet her daughter as soon as possible. You haven't done anything yet. It doesn't work like that. It's so frustrating. I would go as far to say that this was actually another poor decision by her because I don't think she should have just arrived unannounced at their door like that. But anyway, she doesn't get to meet them because Ledger, who conveniently lives across the street, sees her, lurking in their front yard. He comes over and he kind of puts two and two together and realizes that this is Kenna, Diem's mom. So he drags her away in this dramatic scene, puts her in his truck and drives her home. When they arrive at Kenna's flat, Kenna gets out of the truck and says to Ledger, "Fuck you, Ledger." I mean, I wouldn't personally insult someone if I knew they might be my only chance to meet my daughter someday. But that's just me. Her insult, though, has no consequences for her, thankfully, because Ledger is still very much attracted to her, and the only thing he can think about is how much he wants to hug her. He's got to be the king of poor decision-making. Ledger discusses meeting Kenna with her friend Roman, who also works at the bar. Who's also a non-character, I would say. It's just there to say some things at sometimes. He tells Ledger maybe Ledger needs to give Kenna a second chance. This makes Ledger wonder if he'd been too harsh on Kenna. So he decides to go back to check up on Kenna. Now, when he arrives, he sees Kenna lighting fireworks in the front yard with a teenage girl with Down syndrome. This teenage girl in the book is referred to as Lady Diana. She has Down syndrome. She also works at the grocery store where Kenna works. She's also a non-character. She's very much a plot device to make the reader feel something for Kenna. Again, that's not how anything works. You can't just, create a character out of thin air. Don't give them any personality whatsoever, and then expect readers to sympathize with Kenna just because she's nice to this girl. There is no build-up to the friendship between Kenna and Lady Diana. They just meet one night for 5 minutes, literally for 5 minutes. And the next scene we see them in the book, they are lighting fireworks together and they're friends. Plus, we already had the kitten, which Colleen Hoover forgot to use altogether. But if she had, we could have sympathized with Kenna towards her interacting with the kitten. So Kenna decides to name her kitten Ivy. Ivy was a woman she got to meet while she was in jail. She was the only person who was kind to her and gave her one of the few good advices that I think exist in this book. She says, "They took your baby from you and you won't ever get over that. So you decide right now, right here, are you going to live in your sadness or are you going to die in it?" I like this because it's true. Some things are too painful for you to get over, ever. Like the loss of a loved one, for example. Sometimes you never get over that. So the question is, yes, are you going to let it ruin your life? Or are you going to carry this pain and sadness and live with it? Now, what happens with Kenna's daughter is that she has her baby in jail and she's immediately taken away from her. Obviously, she has postpartum depression. She's separated from her baby. So what she does to ease her pain a little is to write these letters to Scotty. Obviously, Scotty is not going to read these letters. It's just an outlet for her to battle her depression, which, fine, I get it. I don't like these letters because of what happens with them in the end, which I'll come back to later. Now, that's fine. Okay, she decides to write these letters as a way of expressing herself because she has no one to talk to. She didn't really have a family growing up because her father left and her mother wasn't a very responsible parent, to the point that she kept ending up in foster homes when she was a child. Her mother came back a couple of times and took custody of her again, but because she never stuck around, Kenna has grown up with this fear of abandonment, which can explain why she is so fixated on getting to her daughter as soon as possible. One would think that this sense of abandonment would kind of trigger her because she leaves this poor kitten at her flat for hours, but surprisingly, no, that never comes up. While she's in jail, Kenna is forced to call her mother. After so many years of not having contact with her, Kenna asks her to bring DM to the jail sometime so that she can meet her, and her mother says, it's a 5-hour drive. This would have been perfect if Colleen Hoover stopped right here. This sentence is short, gets the point across. It shows that what kind of a person her mother is, and it shows that she hasn't changed at all. But unfortunately, Colleen Hoover keeps going on. She keeps explaining that, oh, her mother is not going to help her and Kenna is all on her own. I mean, why? Why would you do that? Why would you ruin an otherwise perfect ending to this conversation? I would have ended the conversation exactly here. It's a 5-hour drive. Done. I understood from Colleen Hoover's writing that she tends to over-explain and spoon-feed the reader. And this is, again, one of my least favorite things that a writer can do. I don't like it when writers assume that the readers are dumb and can't put 2 and 2 together. At this point of the story, Ledger and Kenna both know who the other person is. In their minds, they probably already know it's best for both of them to stay away from each other. But sadly, in their pants, they don't know this. They keep seeing each other. Ledger even hires Kenna to work at his bar because he's the king of poor decision making. Meanwhile, he starts showing Kenna videos and pictures of DM on his phone, which is, I guess, nice of him. They become closer and closer while Kenna is still hoping that Scotty's parents would give her the chance that Ledger is giving. What Kenna fails to understand is that while Ledger is attracted to her, Scotty's parents aren't. By this time, they have found out that Kenna is back in town, so they have got a restraining order on her. But even before that, Kenna doesn't do much, or I would say anything at all, to earn their trust. This is not completely Kenna's fault. Colleen Hoover doesn't provide her character with much of an opportunity to prove herself in any way. Again, I must go back to the kitten. That was really good. You could have used it, Hoover. Why didn't you? What if she took care of this kitten? What if she fell in love with it? What if the kitten had an accident? What if it got sick and Kenna took it to the vet? What if Patrick or Grace worked at the vet and they saw how concerned Kenna is for this little kitten? And they realized that maybe she's not the monster they thought she was. Anything to give these characters and the plot a little bit of depth. Why is that not the story we get to read instead of whatever this is? Colleen Hoover seems more interested in having her characters dry hump in the back alleys and engage in this will they won't they game of sex. Forgiveness is not a given, it is earned. If Kenna really wants Scotty's parents to forgive her, she needs to do more than just show up at their door and chase them in the parking lot. Reach out to them. Make friends with the locals who know these people so that when the time comes, they would vouch for you. Go to the church that they visit. Sit there quietly until they're ready to actually talk to you. Do anything. Buy gifts for your daughter. Ask them to give her the gifts. If they refuse, you show up again without, looking hostile. Just wait until they're ready to hear you out. Show them that you're sorry about what happened with their son. Show them that you're a responsible parent. Do anything other than shagging their son's best friend. I mean, it's especially frustrating because Kenna seems to understand Scotty's parents' perspective. She knows this looks bad, but she still seems very entitled in asking for their forgiveness. And that's not how it works. Just because she thinks she deserves their forgiveness doesn't mean they should forgive her. She makes a lot of bad decisions. We also learned that Ledger, the king of poor decision making, had a fiance named Leah. They were supposed to get married, but Ledger breaks off their engagement. Leah didn't want Ledger to be as involved as he is in Diem's life once they got married. Now, the book treats Leah as this bad woman, but I fail to understand why. It's not like Ledger is Diem's godfather. Diem has her grandparents to take care of her. Ledger just decided to make himself too attached and too involved with this little girl. I understand that this is his deceased best friend's daughter, but Leah doesn't have an unreasonable request. She's like, okay, what happens when we get married? Are you still going to spend so much time with Diem? Are you going to spend more time with her than with me and our children? And he's like, okay, I guess we should break off the engagement. He claims that Leah wasn't good enough for Diem, which, okay, why would she be? You are the person who feels attached to this girl, not her. I guess he gets lucky because he waits long enough for Diem's actual mother to come back to town so that he can fall in love with her. In case it hasn't been clear so far, this book is a convoluted mess. Anyway, after a lot of back and forth, will they, won't they, Ledger and Kenna finally have sex, and Colleen Hoover has to make this as awkward as possible. Before they have sex, Kenna thinks it would be good if she could write a letter to Scotty at this moment. I wish I could write a quick letter to Scotty. I feel like I need to warn him of what's about to happen, which is stupid because he's dead and it's been 5 years and I can have sex with whoever I want. But he was the last person I've ever had sex with, so this feels like a really big moment. Not to mention, it's with his best friend. Isn't that romantic, folks? The sex scene goes on and on for pages. Obviously, it's the best sex they both ever had. And then Colleen Hoover writes this. He slides his thumb up the center of me. I know this book isn't young adult, but he slides his thumb up the center of me? Just say clit or clitoris. Romance writers seem to have a weird aversion towards using this word. And they always come up with strange equivalents for it that don't even make sense. And Colleen Hoover came up with center. After they have sex, Ledger asks Kenna to read one of the letters she has written to Scotty. Obviously, that's what you would think after having sex with your deceased best friend's girlfriend. It's the letter, the one that Kenna has explained in it what happened at the night of the accident. So what happens is that Kenna and Scotty decide to drive to a lake. They bring with themselves some beers and some edibles. They drink the beers, they take the edibles, and they both get drunk and high. I actually found it a bit odd that they did this in the first place because they drove to the lake and they knew they had to drive back in their car. So I don't know why they decided to get drunk and high in the first place. It seems very irresponsible to me right from the beginning. But anyway, they do this and they get hungry and they decide to drive to the town to get food. This is where the accident happens. Kenna is thrown out of the car while Scotty is trapped inside the car. She tries to wake him up. She doesn't succeed. And she immediately thinks that he's dead. Now, the book suggests that because Kenna thought Scotty was dead, she was so heartbroken that she lost her senses and she didn't know what to do. So she just started wandering around until she got home and she never called the police, which we later realized was a mistake because Scotty was still alive and he was alive until hours later. Had she called the police, there was a good chance that Scotty was still alive today. I actually don't find this to be an acceptable excuse. Just because you think someone is dead doesn't mean you shouldn't call the police. I understand that she was devastated and heartbroken, but she still should have definitely called the police. Anyway, so she gets arrested. She's taken to court where she pleads guilty, and the rest of the events of this book take place. Kenna and Scotty both acted irresponsible. Obviously, Scotty can't be blamed, so all the blame falls on Kenna's shoulders. I actually understand how that would make you feel. I still think she should have definitely called the police, but I also understand that this was a very tragic accident. It's not like she's a monster who murdered Scotty in cold blood. Her thought process at the night of the accident was, nothing is going to happen to us because nothing bad happens when you're at your happiest. And this is, again, one of the few things that I liked about this book. We as humans sometimes tend to think ourselves to be invincible, and obviously that's not the case. At this point of the story, Kenna and Ledger have fully started a relationship with one another. It's difficult because they have to keep it hidden from others. Patrick, Scotty's dad, however, finds out. He has a fight with Ledger and he asks him to stay away from DM as well. This scares Kenna because she wants Ledger to be part of DM's life now that she can't. So she decides to leave town as soon as possible. At this point, they have both kind of given up on the idea that Patrick and Grace might one day forgive Jenna. But Ledger has an idea, and that idea is to take the letters Kenna has written to Scotty and ask Patrick and Grace to read the letter. Here goes one of my other least favorite tropes. I don't like it when conflicts or mysteries are solved in books by letters. That has always been a pet peeve of mine. First of all, it's lazy. It is the most least effort thing a writer can do. Second of all, letters are so impersonal. Characters should resolve their conflicts through their interactions, not via letters or emails. That just doesn't cut it for me. So when Ledger gives Patrick and Grace Kenna's letters and they end up forgiving her, I was really disappointed. That was like the last nail in the coffin of this book for me. He just gives them the letters and then poof, everything is forgotten and forgiven. They're like, yep, we've been wrong. We didn't realize how much you were suffering as well, and we hope we can move forward from here now on. That's it. That's the conclusion to this story. Not only they forgive her, but also they keep apologizing to her. And I found that a bit odd. Yes, she didn't murder Scotty, but she's still responsible for half of what happened that night. Also, she's still responsible for not calling the police. I was kind of getting the feeling that Colleen Hoover didn't want Kenna to apologize at all. On several occasions, it seems like she wants to apologize, but then the other person apologizes first and she doesn't. And I find that to be intentional. I would argue that Kenna still has a thing or two to apologize for. Anyways, that's the end of the story. Everything is forgiven. She gets to meet her daughter. I'm guessing she and Ledger and DM are going to live a happily ever after life. That's it. Nothing in this book was resolved in a meaningful way. It was just one convoluted event after another. Characters that just showed up to make things easier for Kenna, despite any sort of effort from her part. And now some sentences and phrases that shouldn't have appeared in this book. If she likes my truck, I love my truck. My truck is my second favorite thing in the world right now. Her mouth is my first. I feel like I've got a bomb strapped to me and it ticks down in his presence, getting closer and closer to exploding my secrets all over him. Pulling away from his kiss felt a little like trying to put out a forest fire with a nuclear bomb. My stomach is a knot that feels tethered to his fist. The further I get from her, the more I feel it unravel. I try to say it like I would normally say it, but I don't know how I would normally say it, because Roman never has to ask me if I'm good. I'm usually always good. I'm leaning my head against the passenger window of his truck, watching him stride up to the snow cone stand with his tattoos and his sex appeal to order 2 rainbow snow cones. There's a war in his eyes, and I am by no means Switzerland, but he comes up to me anyway. It's like Colleen Hoover read that awful line from E.L. James's 50 Shades of Grey. My face must be the color of the communist flag or something. And she was like, hold my beer. Suffice to say that I did not enjoy this book. I didn't like the characters. I wasn't too keen on the plot. I don't like the writing style. I like writing that is polished and sophisticated. And this is none of those things. Colleen Hoover also has some special ideas about what romance is, and her opinion of a romance is, I think, completely the opposite of my opinion. I didn't find this book romantic at all, and I actually think this book would have benefited from not being so romance heavy. If she had dedicated more time and effort to actually create a good story with a sprinkle of romance in there, I think this would have been a much better book. This book is also so repetitive, it can give birth to a whole other book. There are so many adverbs and adjectives to describe character emotions and situations without actually putting in the effort to have the reader experience these emotions and situations. So many sentences start with subjects such as I, he, she, and, in paragraphs that come exactly right after another, which is, I think, poor writing. So many sentences end with prepositions. This book is extremely popular. It has more than 1,800,000 reviews on Goodreads, with a rating of 4.33. I wouldn't care about the problems of this book so much if this book wasn't so popular. I mean, why is this so popular? It has so many issues and the writing is actually very poor. So I'm really confused. I understand that there's an audience for this type of stories out there, but why is this book so popular? Anyway, so that's a wrap for today. Have you read Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover? If yes, what did you think of it? Have you read any other books by Colleen Hoover? Write down your comments for me. Please like this video. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel and I'll be back in the future with more book reviews. Until then, farewell.